1. Daniel walks through the quiet streets of his neighborhood, lost in thoughts. The afternoon sun casts soft shadows on the hot asphalt, but nothing can warm his heart that feels frozen, ever since Emily distanced herself. His eyes wander over unfamiliar faces passing by, yet all he sees is Emily's smile, the way she tossed her hair back when she laughed at his corny jokes. Remembering the early days of their relationship brings a mix of sweetness and pain. They met in 8th grade, two awkward teenagers who found solace in each other amidst the trials of puberty. Since then, they had been inseparable. They shared their first kisses behind the school, studied together for their high school finals, and faced the uncertainty of college side by side. Daniel smiles as he recalls the nights they stayed up late, discussing their future, dreaming of the places they would visit together. He always knew Emily was the love of his life, even before fully understanding what that meant. But fate played a cruel trick when Emily got accepted into a graduate program in their hometown, 6 hours away from the university where they were together. They meticulously planned everything. Daniel would move there in a year, after finishing his own studies. It was a perfect plan, or so he thought. However, that summer when Emily returned home, something changed. She seemed distant, her eyes now holding secrets Daniel couldn't decipher. Phone calls grew shorter, messages less frequent. And then came the final blow, unexpected as lightning on a clear day. During a visit, Emily suggested they take a break. Those words felt like knives piercing Daniel's chest. He fought against despair, trying to understand what had happened. What had changed between them? Anguish consumed him as he tried to hold the relationship together, even though the foundations were already cracked. At that moment, however, he couldn't imagine how the distance would become not just physical, but emotional. Gradually, the warmth of their love began to dissipate, leaving him alone in the cold uncertainty. Daniel stops at the curb, unsure where to go next. He closes his eyes for a moment, letting tears flow freely down his face. The weight of the past feels unbearable at times, but he knows he must carry on. The story of Daniel and Emily is far from over, and what comes next, only time will tell. Daniel still stands by the curb, lost in his painful thoughts. Memories of Emily seem to swirl around him, a constant echo of once happy moments now tinged with sadness. He knows he needs to move forward, but each step feels harder than the last. While the pain is still fresh in his heart, he recalls the turbulent days following Emily's decision. That suggestion to take a break resonated like a mournful bell in his ears. He tried everything to keep the relationship alive, to reignite the flame that seemed to be slowly fading. But Emily, a shadow of her former self, remained distant. Their meetings were marked by awkward silences and averted gazes. Daniel felt like he was losing not just the woman he loved, but also his best friend. Every time he looked into her eyes, he saw a vacancy that left him breathless. The summer that promised love and reunion turned into a period of emotional turmoil. Daniel struggled to understand what had happened, while Emily seemed to slip further out of his reach. Unspoken words hung in the air, weighing like lead on their broken hearts. And then came the news that would change everything. Emily was accepted into a graduate program in their hometown, 6 hours away. The meticulously laid plan of living together in a year now seemed like a distant mirage. Daniel felt like the ground had been pulled from beneath his feet, leaving him adrift in a sea of uncertainties. The physical distance became a mirror of the emotional distance growing between them. Each mile apart was an open wound on his already torn heart. He wondered if he could ever rebuild what they had lost, if Emily still loved him, or if it was all an illusion he had created. Daniel steps away from the curb, walking heavily along the sidewalk. The fog of uncertainty envelops him as he tries to find a way forward. The past pulls him back, but he knows he must press on. The story of Daniel and Emily is not over yet, and the next pages hold twists that neither of them could foresee. Daniel walks along the sidewalk with slumped shoulders, carrying the weight of pain and disappointment. Each step is an effort to move forward, while his mind incessantly returns to the painful moments that are now his reality. He vividly recalls the day Emily finally spoke the words he dreaded hearing. Sitting on the park bench where they used to spend entire afternoons, she looked at him with eyes that no longer shone the same way. Daniel tried to read her feelings in the tense silence that stretched between them, but Emily finally broke the ice with words that cut like sharp knives. "Daniel, I think we need to take a break." Those words, spoken with a delicacy that didn't lessen the wound they caused, echoed like thunder in his mind. He felt as if he had been hit squarely in the chest, his heart shattering into 1,000 pieces as he desperately tried to understand what was happening. He begged, pleaded for an explanation, but Emily seemed to have closed herself off in an impenetrable shell. She said she still loved him, but not in the same way. The words fell on him like cold raindrops, undoing the dreams they had built together over the years. Daniel knew he couldn't force her to stay, even though every fiber of his being cried out for it. He took a deep breath, swallowing the lump in his throat as he prepared for the only thing he could do at that moment. "Emily, I understand." His voice trembled slightly, betrayed by the emotion he tried to control. "If that's what you need, then I guess it's for the best." He tried to smile, a fragile attempt to hide the pain consuming him inside. Emily looked at him with a mix of sadness and relief, as if a difficult decision had been made. And then, with a final hug that felt more like a goodbye, they parted ways. Daniel walked away from the park, aimlessly. The tears he had held back for so long now flowed freely down his face. The pain of the separation was like an unbearable burden, weighing on his shoulders as he tried to understand how everything had changed so drastically. In the days that followed, he sank into a deep sadness. Every moment was a struggle to put one foot in front of the other, to find a purpose in a world that now seemed empty without Emily by his side. She didn't try to contact him in the weeks that followed, and each day without a word from her was a painful reminder of how things had changed. Daniel wondered if he would ever recover from the loss he felt, if he would ever find the peace he so desperately sought. But as the pain consumed him, a small spark of hope still burned inside him. A hope that maybe, one day, they could find their way back to each other. The future was uncertain, but Daniel knew their story wasn't over yet. In the days following his final breakup with Emily, Daniel sank into a state of painful introspection. Every moment was a raw reminder of the loss he felt, as if a piece of his own soul had been torn away. He tried to occupy his mind with daily activities, but the pain seemed to permeate his every breath. He clung to memories of the happy times they shared, but even those memories were now shrouded in a mist of sadness. He revisited the smiles, the laughter, the intimate moments shared under the warm summer sun and the cold winter nights. Each memory was a knife piercing his heart, making him question what had gone wrong, where he had failed. Daniel knew he needed to move on, but each step was a battle against the longing and loneliness that consumed him. He found himself reflecting on his own choices, wondering if he could have done something differently to save what they had. But deep down, he knew that love couldn't be forced, that Emily had the right to follow her own path, even if it meant leaving him behind. As weeks passed, he tried to fill the void Emily had left in his life. He focused on his work, found comfort in the company of loyal friends who supported him during his darkest moments. He sought out new hobbies, explored new interests, but Emily's shadow still loomed over him, a ghostly presence he couldn't ignore. Then came the hardest period of all, the weeks when Emily didn't try to contact him. Each day without a call, a message, an attempt at reconciliation, was a painful confirmation that the chapter they shared together had come to an end. Daniel felt like he was adrift in a sea of uncertainties, with no safe harbor to return to. But as time passed, Daniel began to find small rays of light among the dark clouds that surrounded him. He found himself genuinely laughing with friends, finding joy in the small things in life that he had forgotten while he was immersed in his love for Emily. He realized that despite the pain, he was starting to rebuild himself, becoming a stronger and more resilient version of himself. The breakup had hurt him deeply, but it had also taught him valuable lessons about love, loss, and self-discovery. Daniel was learning to live without Emily, even though his heart still longed for her. He knew the path to healing was long and winding, but he was determined to walk it step by step, day by day. As he looked back, Daniel could see the marks left by the emotional storm he had faced, but he also saw an uncertain future, full of possibilities that he couldn't yet fully envision. He knew that whatever came next, he would be stronger for having faced the storm with an open heart. And so, with each beat of his heart, Daniel continued his journey of self-acceptance and healing. knowing that while love may change and fade, the lessons he learned from Emily would stay with him forever. Daniel was starting to get used to the idea of moving on without Emily when an unexpected twist shook his already fragile world. He received a call from her after weeks of silence. His heart raced as he held the phone, struggling to control the emotions threatening to overflow. "Daniel, can we meet to talk?" Emily's voice sounded uncertain, laden with a complex mix of regret and hope. He stayed silent for a moment, trying to process the whirlwind of feelings that just hearing her name brought. Part of him wanted to refuse, to protect himself from the possibility of more pain. But another part, the part that still loved her deeply, longed for answers, for a chance to understand what had happened between them. Finally, he agreed, choosing a neutral place where they could talk without the painful memories that familiar locations might bring up. The meeting was tense, marked by furtive glances and carefully chosen words. Emily seemed uncomfortable, her words hesitant as she tried to find a way to explain the inexplicable. She admitted to making a mistake by pushing him away so abruptly, confessing that her own insecurities and fears had contributed to the confusion between them. Daniel listened intently, his heart oscillating between the desire to forgive and the need to protect his broken heart. When he finally had the chance to speak, Daniel honestly shared how the separation had affected him. He described the sleepless nights, the lonely days, and the painful journey to find a new normal without Emily by his side. His voice, choked with emotion held back for so long, revealed the depth of his pain and his tireless effort to recover. Emily listened to every word with an expression of sadness and remorse, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She tried to explain that she had realized too late how much Daniel meant to her, how she had underestimated the power of the love they shared. The meeting ended with a hesitant hug, a gesture of reconciliation mixed with the shadow of uncertainty. Daniel felt a whirlwind of emotions as he watched Emily walk away, questioning whether it was possible to rebuild what they had lost, or if the scars of the past were too deep to heal completely. As he walked home that night, Daniel found himself caught between the past and the present, between pain and hope. He knew the road ahead would still be full of challenges and doubts, but for the first time since the breakup, he felt a small spark of optimism burning inside him. The future was uncertain, but he was willing to take the risk, knowing that true love is worth every struggle and sacrifice. And so, with an open heart and eyes turned towards the unknown horizon, Daniel began to walk towards a new chapter of his story with Emily, knowing that nothing would be as simple as before, but that every step would be worth it, no matter where it led them. Daniel and Emily began to rebuild their relationship with caution and hope. Each meeting was marked by a mix of tenderness and hesitation as they navigated the turbulent waters of their emotions. Daniel still bore the scars of their separation, the pain fresh in his memory, but he wanted to believe that their love could overcome everything. They spent hours talking, sharing their fears, dreams, and regrets. Emily explained how she had felt lost, how the pressures of adulthood and the distance had shaken her confidence in the future they had planned together. Daniel listened with a heavy heart, wishing he could erase the tears she shed as she confessed her own mistakes. Together they explored the places they used to frequent, reliving memories and creating new ones. Every shared smile, every gentle touch of their intertwined hands, was a silent promise of a new beginning. But no matter how hard they tried, there were moments of tense silence, painful memories that threatened to crack the fragile web of hope they were weaving. Daniel struggled to trust again, to believe that Emily wouldn't leave him again. He found himself watching her with a mix of love and distrust, his eyes searching for signs that she truly still loved him. Sometimes he woke up in the middle of the night, his heart heavy with nightmares of reliving the pain he had faced before. Emily, in turn, did everything she could to rebuild the trust they had lost. She was determined to show Daniel that her words were true, that she loved him more than ever and was willing to fight for them. Every loving gesture, every word of support, was an attempt to heal the wounds she had caused. And so, amid moments of joy and uncertainty, Daniel and Emily walked together toward the future. They knew the path would be difficult, that forgiveness and rebuilding would take time, but they were willing to face the challenges together, knowing that the love they shared was stronger than any obstacle they could face. As time passed, Daniel felt his heart open up to Emily again, allowing himself to dream of a future where their love story could blossom once more. He knew nothing was guaranteed, that fate might still have more tests and trials for them. But he was determined to move forward, believing that this time, their love would be strong enough to withstand any storms life might bring. And so, with each step taken toward one another, Daniel and Emily continued their journey of rediscovery, learning that true love is built not only in happy moments, but also in shared hardships and the courage to face the unknown, side by side. Daniel and Emily continued their path of rebuilding with determination, but fate still had challenges in store for them. As time passed and they grew closer, Daniel began to feel a shadow of doubt hanging over their relationship. Their days of happiness were often interrupted by moments of uncomfortable silence, where unspoken words echoed between them like ghosts from the past. Emily, on the other hand, seemed increasingly absorbed by her academic obligations and her own internal reflections. The plans they had begun to make together seemed to slowly crumble as she drowned in a world of studies and responsibilities that consumed her. Daniel tried to be understanding, but he couldn't ignore the growing feeling that something was wrong. Deep down, he wondered if they were truly rebuilding their love or just postponing the inevitable. The uncertainty gnawed at him, even as he tried to maintain a facade of normalcy for Emily. He found himself questioning whether the intensity of their love would be enough to overcome the barriers now separating them. The moments of happiness they shared were like small islands in an ocean of worries and doubts. Daniel tried to drown his fears in the laughter they shared, in the memories of the good times they had lived together. But the shadow of uncertainty persisted, haunting him in the most intimate and quiet moments they shared. He tried to talk to Emily about his concerns, but his attempts often resulted in defenses and vague excuses. Emily was distant, her words carefully chosen to avoid confrontation, but also to avoid a painful truth they were reluctant to face. Sometimes, Daniel found himself watching Emily sleep beside him, wondering if she was really there with him, or if her mind had already moved beyond the reach of their fragile connection. He felt lost in a maze of contradictory emotions, caught between the desire to fight for the love still burning inside him, and the fear that it was all just a fleeting illusion. As time continued to pass, Daniel felt the weight of silence growing between them. Each day without an honest conversation was like another link added to the chain that bound them. He knew he needed to confront the truth, even if it meant facing the end he so feared. And so, with a heart heavy with uncertainty and a spirit weary from fighting the inevitable, Daniel began to prepare for a conversation that would change everything. He knew the time had come to face Emily and ask what was really happening between them. For deep in his soul, he knew he couldn't continue living in the shadow of doubt forever.